Let's break it down straight from the hill to your hometown. No spin, no hype, just facts we find. AI's on the case, no truth left behind. Laws are written, deals are made. Who's got your back, who's throwing shade? We cut through the noise, decode the text, keeping it real. Congress in context, Congress in context, shining the light, breaking it down so you know what's right. Policies, votes, who's working for you? We bring the facts, the power is you.
Welcome to Congress in Context. Today we're doing a deep dive into the Congressional Record from May 15th, 2025. We've got this snapshot from just one day, and the idea is to pull out the really interesting bits, help you understand what's going on in Congress and, well, why it matters.
Exactly. And this one day, May 15th, it's quite revealing. You get a real mix, everything from, personal recognitions right up to major policy fights.
Yeah, it's like a microcosm of the whole operation. So let's get into it. One thing that always strikes me is how often they start with tributes, honoring people and places back home.
Mm-hmm. It's a direct connection.
Like Representative De La Cruz recognizing Sisters, a business in Deep South Texas celebrating 35 years.
Right, and it's more than just, a nice mention. It highlights local success stories on the national stage. We also saw tributes for the McAllen Police Department. It was National Police Week, so that timing was significant.
Okay, that makes sense.
And honoring individuals like Barbara Marpez for her Alzheimer's advocacy work, it shows the breadth of community involvement being recognized.
And not just individuals, right? There was that high school team, the Marauders.
Jesuit High School Marauders, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Celebrating a championship win. The recognition highlighted things like discipline and teamwork, values, essentially.
But it wasn't all celebrations.
Mm-hmm.
The record also reflects the tougher side of things, particularly for law enforcement.
Definitely. There were some very somber moments, remembering Deputy Campbell in Oswego and Deputy Sheriff John Randall McCrary. Especially during Police Week, as you mentioned, those tributes really underscore the dangers involved in that line of work.
It's a stark reminder.
Yeah. And alongside that, you had life milestones being marked, too, like Mr. Robert Bob Willis turning 99, celebrating a long life of service.
99, wow.
And acknowledging Dr. John Cross for delivering the opening prayer, noting his long service as a pastor. It's this whole spectrum of life.
It really is. That mix of honoring service, celebrating milestones, and mourning loss, all documented side by side. We also saw shout-outs to community leaders like Leona Harper, Reverend James Peters Jr. in Denver.
Civil rights leaders, local advocates. It connects the work in D.C. back to community efforts.
And the range is pretty amazing when you look at it. Animal shelters?
Friends of the Fairfax County Animal Shelter, 20 years.
Young Marines in Albany, Georgia.
National Unit of the Year, quite an honor.
Even a World War II veteran, William Chin in Seattle. It's incredibly diverse.
It really is. It shows what individual members choose to elevate and bring attention to from their districts and states.
Okay, so that's the recognition side. Let's shift gears a bit, because this wasn't just tributes. There were some pretty significant policy debates captured as well.
Oh, absolutely. Things got quite heated in places.
Let's start with healthcare. Representative De La Cruz was critical of some Republican budget proposals.
Yes, the argument presented was that these proposals would ultimately raise healthcare costs for families, create more red tape, and worsen the deficit, supposedly to fund tax cuts elsewhere.
So, a pretty standard clash of approaches on healthcare funding and priorities.
A very clear one, yes. It reflects those ongoing fundamental disagreements about the government's role.
Then there was talk about NOAA funding, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Why was that flagged as a concern?
Well, NOAA does a lot more than people might realize. Weather forecasting is huge, obviously vital for safety, agriculture, everything. But they also manage fisheries, monitor coastal issues like, harmful algae blooms. It's a critical science agency.
And the record mentioned bipartisan support for it.
It did, which makes the concern about potential defunding even more notable. It highlights that tension between valuing scientific work and budget pressures.
Okay. Then we had something completely different, California's high-speed rail project. Representative Kiley used some strong language.
He did, calling the continued funding the absolute definition of insanity.
Wow. Why such strong opposition?
The core criticism is the sheer amount of money spent over many years, billions, without any operational passenger service to show for it yet.
So questions about managing massive infrastructure projects and, well, getting results.
Exactly. Accountability for taxpayer money on these huge long-term ventures.
Switching to international issues, there was a statement about the situation in Palestine using the term ongoing Nakba. That's a very loaded term historically.
Extremely loaded.
Yeah.
Nakba refers to the displacement of Palestinians back in 1948. So using that term connects historical grievances directly to the current events in Gaza.
And the statement went further.
It did. It included accusations of genocide against the Israeli government and implicated the U.S. through its aid. It represents a very critical perspective within that whole complex and sensitive debate.
Definitely a strong stance recorded there. Okay, let's look at specific bills. H.R. 2255, letting federal law enforcement officers buy their retired service weapons. Seems straightforward, but caused debate.
On the surface, maybe. Supporters called it common sense, a way to honor service, let them buy their duty weapon at salvage value.
But the pushback was,
The concern raised was about what happens after retirement. Could someone who later becomes legally barred from owning guns for whatever reason have already acquired this weapon without a fresh background check at the point of purchase?
Okay. That loophole concern.
Right. There was also some back and forth mention about whether this could include things like machine guns, though supporters disputed that interpretation strongly. It highlights that tension between honoring officers and firearm regulation.
Understood. Then, a different kind of issue, honoring the police who defended the Capitol on January 6th. A call for a plaque, but frustration about delays.
Yes. It shows how symbolic gestures related to January 6th can still be really difficult and politically charged. The fact that erecting a plaque is facing delays tells you a lot about the lingering divisions.
Yeah, clearly still resonates deeply. Now, H.R. 2240 seemed less controversial, improving law enforcement safety through DATA Act.
Generally, yes. There seemed to be bipartisan agreement on the goal of the bill collecting better data on violent attacks against officers.
Why is that data needed?
Well, the discussion highlighted worries about rising threats, particularly ambush-style attacks. The idea is if you understand the trends better, you can develop better safety protocols and training.
Makes sense. But was there any political angle even there?
There was. The debate touched on the defund the police narrative, with some claims that certain government efficiency efforts, they mentioned DOG, Department of Government Efficiency initiatives, had effectively cut public safety grants.
So even a data bill gets tangled in the wider funding debate.
It often does. Shows how interconnected these issues become.
The record also referenced past Trump administration actions and criticisms, like proposals to defund arts and culture institutions.
Yeah, NPR, PBS, the Library of Congress were mentioned specifically. Concerns were raised about the impact on access to public knowledge and culture.
And Medicaid cuts were brought up too.
Yes, with specific warnings about the potential impact in states like Texas, which already has a high uninsured rate. It framed these proposed cuts as potentially catastrophic for vulnerable populations.
Immigration also came up again. PPS, Afghan evacuees, Haitians.
Right. It's a constant point of friction. The debates reflected differing views on who qualifies for protection, humanitarian obligations versus national security concerns.
And there was that mention of President Trump's past comments on the Constitution.
A statement about whether he felt obligated to follow it led to the introduction of a bill called POCCA Protect Our Constitution and Communities Act. It reflects ongoing concerns about executive power.
Lots of looking back, but also looking forward, or rather, at ongoing concerns. Deportations to El Salvador were mentioned.
Yes, concerns about potentially deporting American residents there, alongside worries about human rights conditions in Salvadoran prisons.
Okay, one of the biggest areas of debate seemed to be around science funding cuts proposed by the administration at the time.
Oh, absolutely. This generated a lot of pushback in the record. We're talking proposed cuts to the National Science Foundation, NSF, the National Institutes of Health, NIH.
Major research engines.
Huge ones. Also, NOAA, again, the EPA, even NASA's science arm, basically targeting fundamental research across the board.
And the arguments against these cuts.
They are pretty stark. Warnings about undermining basic research, stalling innovation, hurrying healthcare advancements, losing scientific talent to other countries.
Falling behind competitors.
Exactly, especially in critical areas like AI, quantum computing. The argument was that these investments pay off economically in the long run, and cutting them is short-sighted and, frankly, dangerous to U.S. leadership.
And was there a counter move mentioned?
Sort of. HRES 417 was introduced a resolution to commemorate the NSF's 75th anniversary. You could see that as a statement, highlighting the value of the very agency facing potential cuts.
Interesting juxtaposition. We also saw a mention of committee work, the Agriculture Committee marking up a bill.
Yep, a brief note, but important. Markup is where the committee really digs into the details, debates amendments. They claim this bill would save taxpayer money and invest in farmers. It's a key part of the process before a bill hits the floor.
Right, the legislative machinery grinding away. The record also touched on a whole bunch of other things quickly. Puerto Rico's energy crisis.
Representative Hernandez flagging the worsening situation there and urging action.
Tariffs and the economy.
Senator Schumer pointing to Walmart saying prices would rise due to Trump's tariffs, warning about the impact on consumers and businesses.
Also criticism about relatives of El Chapo being allowed into the U.S.
That was another point raised by Senator Schumer, criticizing the administration over that report.
And debates over SNAP cuts, the food assistance program.
Yes, criticism directed at Republican proposals on that front.
Endangered Species Act discussion.
Senator Barrasso used the grizzly bear as an example to argue the act is sometimes used, in his view, to obstruct rather than protect, citing bureaucratic delays.
EPA appointments, defense nomination delays, a lot of procedural and personnel stuff, too.
Yeah, concerns about nominee qualifications, delays impacting Defense Department readiness, even claims about research being, quote, thrown in the trash. Standard nomination battles, but reflecting deeper policy disagreements.
And finally, a flurry of Senate resolutions agreed to. Recognizing teachers. Brain Tumor Awareness Month.
Right. These resolutions often signal Senate priorities or raise awareness, commending the University of Florida basketball team to always room for sports.
Always. And adding co-sponsors to resolutions on El Salvador human rights and Gaza aid shows those remain active concerns.
Exactly. And they wrapped up by filing cloture on the nomination of Charles Kushner for ambassador. That's the step to force an end to debate and move towards a vote.
And setting the schedule for the next session.
Yep. Planning the vote on Kushner for a following Monday. Business as usual, in a way.
So, pulling this all together, what does this one day in the Congressional Record really tell you, the listener?
Well, I mean, it shows a Congress juggling an incredible range of issues simultaneously. You go from a local business anniversary to debates about global science funding and international conflicts, all in one day's proceeding.
You see the personal and the political, the local and the national, the celebratory and the contentious all mixed together.
Exactly. You get passionate tributes, really sharp debates, moments of bipartisan agreement and deep partisan divides. It highlights just how many different forces and perspectives are shaping policy.
And hopefully seeing these glimpses helps you understand those forces a bit better,
Yeah.
and how they might actually affect things in your own life or community.
That's the goal, because this stuff isn't just happening in a vacuum in D.C.
Definitely not. So this dives into just May 15th, gives you a sense of the sheer volume and variety of work. What stood out most to you listening? What questions does it spark?
Yeah, it's dense, the record, but it is the primary source. It shows Congress in action, warts and all.
And exploring it like this, hopefully, gives you better context for understanding the headlines and the debates as they happen. This is really just scratching the surface of understanding Congress in context.